Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our Saturday stream for round 3 at the Players Championship. Gonna break down everything you need to know, whether it's for DFS, betting, props, all of that for tomorrow to go out there and have yourself a moving day. Today was an absolute blast on the course. Ended up making some profit on our props overall. Our exposure here in the stream left a little bit to be desired, but hey, on the Patreon had some three-man's hit for right about 5x. Hard Rock Bet was an absolute print fest, I guess is the best word for it today. Didn't lose a single slip over there. And for DFS, we're in decent position heading into the weekend. So hopefully you guys are having a solid Friday yourself and have had a pretty decent tournament over here over the first 2 days. Our leaderboard is shaping up quite nicely. It's looking like it's not going to be a lot of scrubs at the top. We've got Scotty Scheffler up there, Wyndham Clark, who's boat racing the field, guys like Xander, Rory McIlroy there within touching distance, and definitely a few missed cuts that raise an eyebrow or two, but that's not, surprising out here at the Players. Usually we see a lot of those top tier players end up missing the cut. This year was a JT, Jordan Spieth, two of my favorite players that aren't making it to the weekend. So selfishly, a little bit bummed out that I'm not going to get to see two of my boys out there. But outside of that, I don't have much to complain about. We got dinner reservations in about an hour, so we're going to try and keep this stream a little bit quicker than what we had over at least the last few days. So something in that 35 to 40 minute range. So if you have any questions, make sure to get them in as soon as possible. And welcome on into the chat. Cheers to everyone out there. If you're celebrating here on Friday, a little bit of Crown and Coke in the cup just like yesterday. So let's hop right on in. Let's bring up the golf course and hop on into this. As we get started here, first off, let me know down in chat if you guys are in here, and let's find a question just like yesterday. So, who was the guy that screwed all of your lineups? Now, don't make it the same guy as yesterday, right? Yesterday, we were trying to out some of the guys that we needed to turn it around. I would be tempted to say Lucas Glover, but he did end up shooting -3 today. Definitely put a huge fight out there to try and make the cut. Did miss it by 1 stroke, so we'll excuse Lucas from that, right? Because he did his best to make it here today. The guy that screwed me the most was probably Justin Thomas. I think I had like 35% exposure myself, and quite a few of my 5 of 6s that had guys at like -5, -6 in the 6-7K range. All had Justin Thomas in them. So I still have a few lineups that I think I have a good shot on this weekend. But if JT had made the weekend, would have been a whole lot better. That's for damn sure. Cheers to Peach. What's going on? Benny Ann for you. I could see that, right? He had a really rough day. I was rooting for him too. He had a few guys on Twitter that were chirping him last night. And anytime I see a player getting disrespected, I kind of hope they go out there and shove it in their face. So that kind of sucked. Willie Z missed the cut. Yeah. Unsurprising, right after his first round. I didn't have exposure for the main slate, but I did take him for a bounce back in DFS and for the prop side of things. And yeah, unfortunately didn't get it done. So it was his first time back into the fray of competition. Yeah, I agree with you on that. And honestly, this golf course has been his bugaboo over the last 3 or 4 years. He's been really good on the ball striking stuff, but his putting's been horrible. You too with Justin Thomas. Yeah, I feel you. And Van ruined your life. Yeah, he had such a good day on Thursday and then completely killed it today. You took Henley this week. Oof, I could see how that would suck, right? JD double on 17 cost you on a head-to-head. Hey, right? Get it out now, right? That's what this is for. That's why I asked the question, right? Get your frustrations out because, hey, we still got 2 rounds to work with and a lot of profit that we can try and get out here. Michael Kim for you, Michael. I could see that. Did he miss the cut? I thought he had a pretty good first round, so I didn't see how he ended up doing. I'm guessing because he mentioned that he did miss the cut. Yeah, Michael Kim ended up +8 today. Oof, that was unexpected. I mean, he didn't make a single birdie on the round. Poor Michael Kim out there. But let's talk about this golf course a little bit, which today played kind of like we expected, right? We thought that the morning wave would get slightly better conditions, and that is exactly what we got. It ended up being about a 0.3 shot difference between the 2 waves, which didn't amount to that much of an advantage. But when we look at the ceiling rounds, right, so not just the average score out there, a lot of your guys were playing early, right? So Wyndham Clark, of course, going out there and nuking the golf course, who I ended up fading for today, which ended up backfiring, but we'll talk about that here in a second. Matty Fitz was AM, Matt McNeely, Scotty Scheffler, Corey Connors, Matthias Schmidt. I mean, all of these guys up here in the top 10 scores, outside of 3 of them, right? So a solid like 70, 80% were guys going off in the morning. So though it was only a 0.3 shot difference between the 2 waves, which doesn't seem like all that much, in terms of ceiling score, it had a drastic effect on what we saw. So the process, I feel pretty confident with what we were doing yesterday. Just unfortunately didn't play Wyndham Clark, right? Unfortunately didn't play Scotty Scheffler, who went out there and had some of the best rounds of the day. And that's going to absolutely kill you, right? So if we're sorting this, again, sorry, I think I had this sorted by the wrong tab before, but it's the same thing, right? Like it's like 3 of the top 10 scores ended up being from that PM wave. That's why I don't feel so bad, right, about fading guys like a Wyndham Clark. But yeah, Windy C, absolute killer out there. I have to say I watched a lot of his round today, and he didn't miss very much. His swing is kind of out of control. I have to say from a technical perspective, I'm not the biggest fan of what Wyndham Clark has to offer, but he's so damn athletic. He's just so damn talented that it doesn't really matter, right? It's kind of like Scotty Scheffler. You would never teach his swing to somebody else. Windy C, I don't think it's talked about quite a bit enough. He has a swing that he owns. That's for damn sure. You took Eric Cole this week. I could see that. Great call on Harman today. Yeah, he had himself around. Did he make like 10 birdies? I was on my way to the golf course when he was finishing his round, but I know he made like 4 bogeys, which was a little bit strange. But yeah, he made like 10 birdies on the day. Let's check this out. So Brian Harman ended up at -7. He made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 birdies or better, including an eagle on hole number 16. That is unbelievable. So yeah, pretty decent fantasy score out of Brian Harman, but I did fade a Wyndham Clark, right? I did end up fading somebody like a Scotty Scheffler, who had a pretty decent round himself. Who else did I fade that had a really good round? I guess it really was just Wyndham Clark. And Scotty Scheffler shot -3, right? So it's not like he absolutely killed us by fading him, but not having Wyndham in the player pool was pretty detrimental when it came to my ROI. So ended up profiting on the day, but you'd expect a little bit more when you have guys like a Harman going off. Thagala, right, ended up having a really good day himself, who we had in the player pool, but unfortunately didn't have the absolute nut score. So today, from the Showdown perspective, I would say would pretty decent, right? With the fact that we made profit, but I'm looking for those GPP takedowns, right? I'm looking to get those Wyndham Clarks that are shooting a 65, a 64, and that's what we're going to shoot for out there on Saturday. In terms of the Saturday forecast, so how we're going to look at this slate, it looks pretty similar to what we had for today, except that we have a completely different tee time situation, right? So as opposed to just having 2 waves over the first 2 days, now we have all the guys teeing off of, I believe, hole number 1. So let me double check over here on Twitter, the PGA Tour comms Twitter, to see what they're doing. The tee times are going to be 2 sums off of hole number 1, which is huge, right? When it comes to our strategy, you want guys that are going off early most times on the PGA Tour. And based on this weather forecast that we're looking at, I think some of your early starters around 7:40 to 8 a.m. are going to have at least slightly better conditions than what you had in the afternoon. Now, this is pretty reflective of what we saw today, right? A lot of your ceiling performances came from the early tee times, even though there was only a 0.3 shot difference, right? So when we look at the scoring average for Saturday, I think we're going to see, a minimal, if not non-existent edge between the 2 waves. But when we sort this by the best scores of the day out there for moving day, I would almost guarantee you that at least 3/4, at least 2/3 of the top 10 scores tomorrow are all going to be guys in the first half of tee time. So if we know that, right, if we know they're going to get slightly better conditions, more receptive greens in the morning, lower wind conditions, more pristine greens because they're not going to be trampled on the entire day. If we know that, you want to lock that in for a lot of your DFS lineups. So what I'm doing in terms of strategy is I'm going to kind of rinse and repeat what we did for round 2, which is take mostly guys that are going off early and then mix in a few guys that are yesterday, right? Or I should say today, right? We mixed in a few guys from the PM wave. I'm probably going to mix in a few guys from the middle of the tee times too. I'm not really trying to play a lot of these leaders, right? We'll talk about that game theory side as we go through some of the ownership numbers. But these guys at the top of the leaderboard that have late tee times, they're also going to have higher ownership numbers because of their position on the leaderboard. I'm just not all that sold on, right? A Wyndham Clark, a Xander Schauffele, a Scotty Scheffler over here at -8 are guys that are almost automatic fades for me. I mean, Nick Taylor, right, at that ownership, Matt McNeely, who's going to be super high owned out there for Saturday. Same thing with Corey Connors and Tom Hoagie, are almost automatic pieces that I'm just crossing out of my player pool heading into today. So we'll expand on that when we go through some of the ownership numbers. But the kind of players that I'm looking for are the guys that are just hardly making the cut, right? So down here at -1, there are a few guys at that number that I'd take. We'll talk about a few here on the live stream, but I think up until about this -2, -3 range are the tee times that you want to look at, right? You're getting lower ownership numbers on most of those players. They're going to have slightly better conditions than the rest of the day. And there are a few guys I'm mixing in that are like -4, -5, -6. But I'm not making a habit out of it, right? I'm trying to take most of my players from the perceived weather edge. I'm also trying to take guys that are going to be relatively low owned. And by avoiding, let's say, the guys from -7 and above, you could do a really good job, right, of playing that game theory edge. So that's usually the strategy for round 3 showdown. That is not going to change out here for moving day at the players. And the weather forecast, it's calling for the winds to die down a little bit towards the end. So I don't think you have to fade those guys that are going off later. But I am, just because of the game theory edge, right? I don't want to be taking guys that are going to be 2-3 times higher owned, but I know that the morning players are going to have at least like 5-6 ceiling rounds. And if I can get at least 3, maybe even 4 of them into my lineups, if I just pick a few guys that do decent with my other 2 spots, you could take down a GPP, right, with 4 ceiling performances and 2 average performances. So that's the way that I'm going to go about it, right? If one of those top tier guys like a Wyndham Clark, Scotty Scheffler, Xander Schauffele, Nick Taylor, anyone up there in that top 5, top 10 has a nuclear day like Wyndham Clark had today, I'm just going to tip my cap to him, right? I'm going to accept that. That's how Showdown works. It's variant, but I want to set myself up for success, right? When my guys hit, when I go out there and I pick players that have ceiling performances, I want them to be a Brian Harman, right? That was sub 10% owned and scored like 70 fantasy points today. I don't necessarily want it to be Wyndham Clark that was owned in over a quarter of lineups, and just you're not going to get that much done, right, in terms of leverage against the field. So that's it for the Showdown strategy. I'm going to bring up my projections now and talk through some of my top plays for tomorrow. So let's bring that up, see if there's any questions, any tips for a small field single entry. Yeah, we'll talk about that, Tanner. I'll make sure I'll give you that. And maybe a 4-2 AM split. That's kind of what I'm looking at. Yeah. I think that you can mix in guys right towards the middle to the back half of tee times, but you probably want at least 4, maybe even 5 spots allocated to, let's say, the first half of tee time. So I think that's a pretty sharp way of taking that on. So in terms of plays I'm getting to here, of course, guys, these are the projections that I'm posting over there on my Patreon page, where we've got ownership, which will be free for all of you guys here on the live stream, my player pool, projections for everyone. And in terms of my projections, they are skewed towards some of the AM players. So the earlier your tee time, the more of a boost that you get in my projections. And some of the earliest tee times of the day have up to like a 4.5 point boost. So those sort of players, right, are going to show up a lot more in your optimizers if you're using my projections, which will make your life a lot easier, right, when you're building lineups. So that's something that I've built into my projections. My player pool, of course, right, is skewed in that direction, as I just told you guys. But let's talk through a few players that I'm going to get to myself, right, over here on the live stream, in case you guys don't have access to the Patreon yourself. If you do want it, check out the link in the description. Of course, guys, you know where to check that out. But Rory McIlroy at 11-2, he's one of those later starters that I would play, right? And the reason for that is he's coming in lower owned than a Scotty and a Xander Schauffele. These ownership numbers, by the way, are reflective of their GPP ownership, which is going to be a little bit different than single entry. So Tanner before, right, was asking about, the difference between like a GPP and then going after a single entry. The difference is that Rory McIlroy in something like a single entry contest is going to be even lower owned than what we have here. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if Rory McIlroy was like 12 to 13% owned when it came to single entry contests. And guys like a Scotty Scheffler or Xander Schauffele were all 30% plus owned in those single entries. The reason for that, right, single entries, people get a little bit more frugal, right? They're a little bit more prude when it comes to their exposure, and they won't take nearly as many chances. And what that results in is a lot of your top end of the leaderboard getting more steam. So in a single entry, Actually, that Rory McIlroy would be like the nuts play up top, right? If he's going to be like 10 to 13% owned, that is huge leverage compared to the other guys around him. And he doesn't have the best tee time, right? He's -6. So he is teeing off towards the latter half of the day, but he's the same type of player, right? Fantasy score wise, as a lot of the guys down there in that 9 and 10K range. And sure, maybe he's slightly inferior to what we have with Scotty Scheffler, but Scotty's going to be like twice the ownership, right? Over there in some of those single entries. And on top of that, he's $12,500. So in general, in single entries, the ownership gets even more polarized than what you have for GPPs, and your pivots are even more so of pivots. So what that kind of means is that you don't have to take 4 pivots in a lineup, because if you take 2, 3 of them would be ideal out there in that kind of single entry. You're going to have 3 guys that are royally unowned, right? So even if you're taking chalk at those other 3 spots, you probably shouldn't take 3 chalky players in the lineup. But if you wanted to, right, your other 3 spots are likely going to offset that. So in single entry, I like pivoting up top, right? I like taking guys like a Rory in that kind of lineup. And then, a little bit further down the board, maybe being a little bit more chalky and more conservative with my 7 and 8K plays. So Rory, right, obviously a player that I'm getting to, has won here before. His irons look a lot better this year. And today, right, was a little bit shaky, but that's also why we're getting a lower ownership number. Viktor Hovland has a relatively early tee time. So unlike Rory McIlroy, does have that weather advantage going for him. Also relatively low ownership because of the fact that he's only -2 at this stage, and is another player that has a really good track record around TPC Sawgrass. Added little benefit to Viktor Hovland is I think the more competitive rounds that he has under him, the better that he's going to get. So though for 4-round contests, I didn't play him this week, right? I faded him for some of those. I love him for the Showdown format, especially for rounds 3 and 4, as he starts to get that swing under him, right? He's been working with his swing coach every single day, and I think whether it's tomorrow, maybe might be tomorrow, might be Sunday, might even be like next week or the week after, he's eventually going to turn that switch, right, and turn into the Viktor Hovland that we know him to be. And when that happens, he's going to be lower owned than he should be, right? He's only $9,700 here. I mean, cheaper than Patrick Cantlay. It's just ridiculous if you're asking me from a pricing perspective. It just feels like a good spot to buy in on Viktor Hovland, because I feel like that big round is coming soon. I feel like that form is coming soon with Viktor Hovland, and I'm going to be a little bit early to that. Next up, we've got Sam Burns, who also barely made the cut. Super clutch par over there in 18 to make sure that he made it to the weekend for our lineups. I was worried after day 1 for sure, but now we're getting him at 8.1%. He's also going off with an early tee time, so he has that weather advantage going. And kind of like Viktor Hovland, day 1 was scratchy out there, but today was hitting a lot of good iron shots. He chipped in on hole number 14, maybe the most difficult hole on the entire golf course, and the putter hasn't even got hot yet. And if you take a look at some of the advanced metrics, right over here with the shots gained to putting on Poa Trivalis, he gains 1.2 strokes per round on average, which is by far the best in the world. It's not even close. He's got 3 wins on this Poa Trivalis Overseed, 2 at the Valspar Championship. I forget the other course and he ended up getting a win at, but it's like 3 of his 5 tour wins have come on this exact type of grass. So that's why I loved him for an outright this week. That's why he was one of my core plays for DFS. And now that he's low owned, he's cheap right over there at $8,800. I feel like he's the perfect type of showdown play. Tony Finau, another guy that maybe doesn't have the earliest of tee times, but still, over there in the first half of all the starters. $7,900, so super cheap, right, for the talent level you're getting with Tony Finau, and only about 12.5% owned. So these are the kind of guys I'm getting to, right? Another aspect that I'm looking at with these players is they're high birdie or better percentage guys, right? They're guys that in the showdown format specifically tend to have a lot of ceiling rounds, right? Tony Finau, for example, perpetually are, usually top 5, top 10 when it comes to birdie or better percentage. Sam Burns, maybe not quite as elite when it comes to birdie percentage, but is known for going absolutely nuclear out here in showdown slates. Viktor Hovland, right? He's one of the best showdown scorers that we have. Rory McIlroy, right? Usually top 3 when it comes to birdie or better percentage, are why I'm prioritizing these type of players up top. as opposed to maybe guys that are a little bit more conservative, right? So, for example, Corey Connors is a little bit of a conservative player at times. Matt Fitzpatrick fits that description. Jason Day, Shane Lowry, not always the most aggressive players. You can say the same thing about like a Cantlay or even like a Xander Schauffele, right? Their birdie or better percentage isn't quite as elite as what you have with like a Rory McIlroy up top. Down here in the 8K range, right? Like guys like Sam Burns, I'm kind of blow away. Guys like a Jason Day and Shane Lowry when it comes to their birdie averages. The guys that are known for putting up, 6, 7, even 8 birdie rounds are the players that I want to prioritize over there in my exposure. Let's see if there's any questions in chat. And then we're going to talk through some of the 7 and 6K range. A few players I'm taking for a little bit of salary savings. So we got a question about the one guy I would play in a DK single entry. So it is probably Rory McIlroy, if I'm going to be honest. And it's for that reason I was mentioning before, right? In single entries, that ownership gets even more polarized than before. And he's just going to be so much lower owned than a lot of the other guys up there in that 9 and 10K range that if he goes off, that one spot alone might get you 15, 20 fantasy points on the field. So I would go with Rory. If you want to be a little bit more like daring with it, right? Maybe it's not a stud that I want to mention here. It would probably be Sam Burns for me, right? He's got that super early tee time. He's going to be one of the first groups off because he was PM wave today and right made the cut on the number. Sam Burns and Rory McIlroy would be my top 2 for sure. Mitchell or Im tomorrow would be Sanjay Im for me because of ownership purposes, right? Sanjay would be a little bit lower owned. Is there a very different strategy for single entry cash? Yeah, dude, cash is a completely different animal. If I was running cash lineups, Andy, it would be completely looking at just projected points. In fact, if I was going out there and building cash lineups, which I hardly ever do, I just don't play cash. It's not a part of my process. I would simply upload my projections right into my optimizer. If you're out there using a different optimizer, right, just take my projections if you're on the Patreon, upload them, and I would simply enter the top rated lineup, right? The one that it generates first out there with the highest possible score, because that's all cash is, right? Cash is about going out there, having the best projections compared to the rest of the field. And in golf, it's not about ownership, right? You're okay taking high owned players out there in a cash contest. Just a very different type of strategy that you would want to unload. In cash, right, it's about beating 50% of the field, right? You're not worried about getting those ceiling performances. So yeah, definitely a little bit of a different beast when it comes to the strategy. Just to give you an idea, I think Scotty in cash is literally a must play. I can't imagine building a cash lineup tomorrow and not having a minute. So I would start with Scotty almost surely there. The one issue with that is that it is a little bit cost prohibitive, right? Taking a Scotty Scheffler, but you should be able to make it work. Thoughts on Hideki? I think he's a decent play if you're okay eating the ownership, right? It's not out of hand, right? I have him at 16.2% when it comes to his projected ownership. I do have to say, though, he feels a little bit expensive, right? At that kind of $9,500 price tag, I personally would rather spend the $200 and get a Victor Hovland, somebody that I think is just a better player, right, overall and at this stage of his career. But he's a much better play than Wyndham Clark, right? Wyndham Clark's going to suck up a lot of that ownership. And if Wyndham wasn't right there, Hideki would probably be 20, 22% owned. So you are getting a slightly better number on Hideki than you would otherwise get if Wyndham Clark wasn't in the lead. So I'm not against the play. I just don't love it, though, if that makes sense. Just a few other guys I would prefer to take on top of them. Victor Hovland's one, also Max Homa as another player that I would slightly prefer to take. But I think I get what you're doing there, and I think it's a pretty decent strategy. A few of the cheaper plays that we're going to get to here, so 7K guys I want to point out. We've got Minwoo Lee at $7,500. He also just hardly made the cut. Also going to be a really early starter because he was a PM Wave golfer today, and he's only 9% owned. So a guy like Tony Finau that I liked heading into the week, and now that we can get him at low ownership with a relatively early tee time, it's the perfect spot to deploy a player like Minwoo. We also have Aaron Rai, who was super chalky this week. Anytime you have a popular player, a guy that fits the golf course that is going to be low owned for a round 3 showdown, I'm almost always going to be a buyer. And Aaron Wright checks all 3 of those boxes and is a player I'd take at 7,200. Jake Knapp at $7,000, right? Another guy who's going to be going off super early, -1, and just a stud, right? I mean, we've seen him win on the tour. We've seen him, finish top 10 at other signature events like the Farmers. Only $7,000, so you're saving some salary by taking Knapp here. And in terms of birdie production, this is something that I've noticed about Jake Knapp. He posts a shit ton of birdies, right, compared to his placement. So he can make some blow poles. I mean, we saw that at hole number 6 at the API, but he also goes out there and posts, on Sunday, you saw that API made a shit ton of birdies to make up for that. Ryo Hisatune is somebody that has not made the cut officially yet, so that's why he's over here highlighted in yellow. If he makes the cut, he's essentially going to be unowned. You can see how I'm at 0.0% projected ownership. So I'm going to wake up early tomorrow, right, as I typically do out here on a moving day. Going to check the pins for props. That's the main reason that I'm waking up. But also going to take a look at Hisatune, right? Going to see if he ends up making the cut. He needs to go out there and birdie 18 to make it. Ben Silverman is also not finished with his round. He needs an eagle on 9 to go out there and make the cut, but he's in the fairway after 2 shots already. So he'd have to hold the iron shot to go out there and make it to Saturday. More realistic, though, right, is Hisatune, who has not even teed off on the hole yet, and in the morning is taking on hole 9 without wind into him, right? So he should be able to reach that green complex in 2, and if he can birdie it, could be like the ultimate leverage spot, right? And the reason for that would be he's going to be sub like 0.5% owned, and Hisatune is a pretty solid player, right, based on his track record so far this year. So if you're going to wake up early, you're going to be able to check on whether he makes the cut or not. You might want to throw him into a few lineups, right? If you're going to be sleeping in, maybe you're a West Coast guy who's not going to be up at 4:40 a.m. When they'll probably start a little bit later than that because it's over here at moving day, but still super early for some of you guys over there on the West Coast. Then maybe don't take a shot on using him in lineups, right? You don't want to play somebody who's not making the weekend, but if you're able to get up and check on that, it is a potential spot to get some leverage. Thomas Dietrich is going to be the last play that we go through here over here on the live stream. I am taking like 4 or 5 guys down here in the 6K range, but to give you an idea of the types of players I'm looking at, right? I went upside, so Thomas Dietrich, we've seen that this year, right? He's already had some top level finishes. He's $6,600, so you're saving a ton of salary, and he's also at the -1 score, so he has an early tee time. So he checks a lot of the different boxes I'm looking for, right? If I'm going to take someone down here in the 6K range, they better have that weather edge for them. They better be a player that's a high birdie percentage player, with what we have here with a Thomas Dietrich, and they better be low owned, right? They better not be somebody that's getting a lot of attention. So, when we compare Thomas Dietrich to CT Pan, it becomes extremely apparent why I take a Dietrich over Pan. Pan's playing better, right? He's -7 over the first 2 rounds, but he's 3 times higher owned, right, when it comes to his exposure. So Thomas Dietrich at the kind of price tag is, the quintessential value play that I'm looking for down here in the 6K range. See what's going on down there. Let's go through some lineup construction stuff. So I want to bring up Draftkings real quick and show you guys how you build, a few different types of lineups to kind of cater it towards the contest that you're entering. So if you're entering into a cash lineup, just to cover that, because I know we had a question down there in chat about it, I would almost certainly take Scotty Scheffler. So let's just go ahead, throw him into a lineup. It does handicap you a bit when it comes to your salary, but there are enough guys down here in the 7K range that make sense that you can make this kind of lineup work. So if you're playing cash, do not use Ryo Hisatune. That would probably not be your best idea. But if I was starting a cash lineup down here, I'm looking for somebody that's consistent, right? In cash, we're trying to beat half the field. And if you're looking for consistency down here, we mostly want to look at ball strikers, right? We want guys that are in form and that are ball strikers. And a few guys that would check that box: Kurt Kitayama, right? A player who's -3, right? Tied for 34th over the first 2 days, and is a very consistent player, right? Just a good player compared to a lot of his peers here. So let's go ahead and throw him into the lineup. Let's see. You can say the same thing about Eckroat. I mean, this guy's been in crazy form over the last like 3-4 weeks. Also cheap to help you save some of that salary. Another real consistent player that you can add in would be like Like the antithesis of that would be like a Minwoo, right? Minwoo's got a really wide range of outcomes, but like an Alex Noren, for example. So I'm showing you this because it's a completely different thought process. I'm not so thinking here about a player's upside or their ability to make like 7, 8 birdies. I'm more so looking for the guys that I know aren't going to blow it, right? Aren't going to go out there and shoot like a +5, +6 round. And these kind of ball strikers that are in form, Alex Noren, maybe not the best ball striker, but is a relatively consistent player, are the types of guys I'd mix into that kind of exposure. Whereas for GPPs, right, we were looking for all of that upside, and I'm trying to get different to the field. That's where I think even skipping the 10K range entirely might come in handy. Maybe a starting lineup with the Hovland, trying to be a little bit more balanced about it, but balanced but different, right? Balanced but contrarian would be the way that I would handle this for GPPs. So rather than starting like more balanced with some chalk, like you could throw in down here like a Xander, right? Rather than taking a Scotty Scheffler, your second man in could have been like a Wyndham Clark, right? To make that a little bit more chalky. I prefer to be cheaper and a little bit more contrarian. So you can start with like a Hovland or a Burns there, your third man in, right? Just to try and keep this a little bit more contrarian. Like maybe it is a Shane Lowry. This kind of lineup is super easy to build, right? We still have $7,600 remaining, which, by the way, was more salary on average left than what we had when we just took Scotty Scheffler, right, as our first man in, right? We still have a higher average salary after taking 3 studs in our lineup. So it's not just the fact that Scotty's going to be high owned. It's also the fact that he completely tanks the rest of your salary is why that I don't think he's the best play out there for moving day. So I prefer this kind of build down here in the 7K range. Maybe you throw Tony Finau in, right, as one of your top end of the 7K range players. None of these guys are going to be mega chalky. They're all going off relatively early, and they're all also players that you're going to have leverage onto the field by taking them in like 30, 35% of your lineups. In terms of like a single entry, this is where like if you fall in love with one of these chalky pieces, I don't have a problem getting to them, right? So, let's say you do really want to play a Scotty Scheffler, you could probably make it work in a single entry type of GBP. So, again, I don't love all the salary implications of taking him in lineups, but if you're going to do it, probably do it in either smaller field GPPs where it's only like 1,000, maybe 2,000 entries at most, or the single entry format where you don't have to worry nearly as much about getting different or about duplication, just because there's not like 80,000 entries that you're playing against there. Any DFS stuff? If not, we're going to talk about some prop stuff. And of course, Andy, that's why we're here, right? That's why we do these live streams, is to make sure you have all that info. If you guys are just here for the DFS stuff, that is going to be it when it comes to DFS. If there's any specific questions that you still have about it, feel free to go ahead and throw them down in chat. But if you're on out of here because you're just a DFS guy, appreciate the support here as per usual. Best of luck with those lineups. And the only thing I ask is that you smash the like button on the way out of here, and you go out there and kill it for your Saturday exposure. But we still have a lot to talk about here, especially when it comes to props, and a little bit of a deep dive that we're also going to do on the pin locations here. So let's go ahead and bring up the pin locations. Let me go ahead and bring up Tourcast, and let's take 5-10 minutes here and really get an idea for what these players are going to face. And if there's one thing for props, even just like for fantasy in general, that I think players don't consider enough, it's the setup of the golf course, right? And while we don't have all the different tee boxes out here for Saturday, we do know that they're going to move up hole number 12 and make it a drivable par 4. We do have all these tee boxes, all this information that we have at our disposal. We would be an absolute fool, right, not to go out there and use it. So let's go ahead and bring it up and figure out what this golf course is going to look like. So there's Tourcast. There are our pin locations, and let's go ahead and hop right on in. I'm spilling here. Good thing I have to change before we go. So we'll be good with our dinner reservation with the shirt. But hole number 1 is in this back right little corner. This pin location is actually a lot easier than what we had for the first 2 days. So round number 1, it was tucked just over this bunker on the left side, made it a hard pin to get to because it was protected by this hazard. And today, of course, it was a back left pin location, and maybe not as tucked as what you had for hole 1, but of course just played to a longer distance. And you didn't really want to hit it into this bunker on the left or short side yourself over here to the back left. So a lot of players were a lot more conservative out here for today. Obviously, Wyndham Clark wasn't conservative. I'm hitting the ball out there to 18 inches. But now that the pin's over here on that right side, You also have some slope, right? That's going to help you potentially funnel the ball a little bit closer to this pin location. And it's also a lot further away from this bunker. So I think you're going to see guys a lot more aggressive to this pin location. I think you're going to see a lot more birdies at hole number 1. And on top of that, your up and down, if you end up missing to the right side, is very trivial, right? I mean, you're playing into the slope over there from that right side of the green. And I think hole number 1 is definitely going to be a lot easier. Hole number 2, let's take a look at that now. So hole 2 is going to be like a middle left pin. That would probably be the best way to describe that pin location. Oh, wow, they got a massive ad over here on the shot tracker. This pin location, I would say, is neutral compared to days 1 and 2. I don't think it's going to be overly hard. I also don't think it's going to be over easy there. It's a decently easy up and down, I would say, for most of your misses around the green, but it's a similar distance to what you had days 1 and 2. And overall, I don't think it's going to change its character all that much. Hole number 3 is a back middle pin. It's kind of up here on this back ledge. And this is a pin location that's going to be significantly harder, right, than what we had for today. Round number 2, it was over here on the front. Obviously, Wyndham Clark, right, hit it to about 12 feet, ended up draining the birdie. Day 1, they had it back on that same lip, and it played to, I think, like a 0.2, 0.3 shot higher average. So that's what you're going to end up seeing. This little slope that bisects the green does make a lot of shots to that pin a little bit more difficult, whether it's off the tee or around the green if you end up missing the surface. Hole number 4 is a front pin location. In theory, you would think that this pin location is easier, right, than the one tucked over here on the left, but it's not. When you have this pin over here on the right side, there are a lot more water balls over here at hole number 4. And while I don't think the birdie average is really going to change all that much, I do think you're going to see a significant impact when it comes to your bogeys and your double bogeys that you're seeing at hole number 4. So I would say a slightly harder pin location, not so much when it comes to making birdies, but more so when it comes to avoiding that agua to the left. Hole number 5 is a middle left pin, maybe slightly back here towards the back edge. I would say very similar to what we had in round 2. So all things considered, probably a neutral impact when it comes to scoring. Hole number 6 is a back middle pin, maybe slightly shaded towards the right side over here. You have some slope that could potentially move your ball away from the pin location over here to the left side. And it's also going to play a little bit longer than what we had for today. So that one's going to be a little bit harder out there for Saturday. Next up, we have hole number 7, which is a front pin location. This one is going to help players out quite a bit. It's not only going to take some distance off of this hole, but you also have a little bit of a backstop over here on the left, a little hump that you can take shots off of and move it closer to that pin location. And in general, this hole plays into the wind. So any sort of shorter distance, right, on a medium length par 4 into the wind is going to be very much so welcomed by the players. Next up, we have hole number 8, which is another front pin location. It's over here on that front quadrant. And anytime you have a 230-yard par 3, right, it's probably going to play closer to like 210 yards out there for moving day. That front pin is going to help out a whole lot. So you have a little bit of a funnel going on here. If you end up missing slightly left, right, the slope is going to get you closer. Same thing over there on the right side as well. Hole number 9, I believe, was a harder pin. Yeah, hole number 9 is a middle left pin, and it's tucked over here against the bunker. So if you end up missing in this left side bunker, it's going to be a pretty difficult up and down out there for Saturday. And if you're over here in the right rough, you do have green to work with, but these slopes that bisect this green, that you see that little low area right over here towards the top right, does make that shot a little bit more difficult. So it's going to be harder than round 2, right? Round 2 was a super simple, super straightforward front pin location, but it's not, it's a par 5, right? It's not like we're talking about a brutally difficult hole. Hole number 10, so over here on the back side of things, it's I would say a very neutral pin location. It's almost the same spot that we had for round 2. Hole number 11 is a back right pin location. So this is another par 5. It does bring the water slightly more into play, both over the green, right? You can end up hitting it into the water, or of course, if you flail it over here to the right side. And also any back pin location on this green is significantly harder than the front, right? At the front, you have a little bit of a backstop out here with some of the slope towards that front fourth. And then back here on the back slope, there's especially where the pin was today, right? There's a shelf up there. Even over here to the right side, it's a pretty difficult up and down from a lot of the around the green shots. Hole number 12 is a front pin location, and this is the huge change when it's coming to the course setup. So what they do here at hole number 12 every year is they move up the tee box. They make this a drivable par 4. They make it play like 270, 280 yards, and because they have this front pin location, right, that's 5 on, it's 6 from the left, you're going to have guys that make eagle over here at hole number 12. So this is a hole that's not only going to play a little bit easier, it's probably going to play like a whole half shot easier because of the fact they move up the tee box. Hole 13 is a back middle pin. It's I would say a pretty tricky pin because of some of the slope around it. Hole 14 is an absolute brute, routinely, right, the most difficult hole in the golf course. They're giving them a little bit of a break by putting it closer towards the front of the green here, but it's still tucked over that bunker, so it's far from an easy pin location. Hole 15 is a front middle pin. So this one I would say is easier than rounds 1 and 2, but it's not a cupcake pin by any means. There's not really a backstop to work the ball off of. Hole number 16 is tucked near the water on the right. So another one of those easy par 5s, but it's going to bring in some water equity because of how close it's cut over there towards the aquatic penalty area. 17 is a front left pin. So, of course, guys, this is the island green. And kind of like you saw in round 1, there are going to be a ton of birdies right out there for Saturday. So they always put it down in this bowl over here on moving day. And rather than being slightly towards the right side, like what we had for Thursday, it's going to be slightly a little bit closer towards the left. And then for hole number 18, this is maybe the hardest pin location that you have on this hole. They're going to put the pin actually close to where Wyndham Clark hit his second shot today out there on Sunday. And that is a really easy pin location out here, at least comparatively, right, out there for hole 18. This back middle pin location, first off, brings a lot of misses over here on the humps to the right. It does bring the water in even more for some of your approach shots, and it's an overall just longer hole and a hole that was already a brute out there for rounds 1 and 2. So as you can tell from these pins, right, you've got like 12 and 17, which are set up for more birdies. But then you have a lot of pin locations, it starts early too, right? Like hole number 3 is like non-easy hole, right? So a lot of holes that are tucked a little bit closer to the water, you're going to see a higher birdie average out here for Saturday. But my hot take too is that you're also going to see a higher bogey average. So that's not really uncharacteristic, right? That's not that much of a surprise when it comes to moving day. But these are truly moving day pin locations, right? If you execute a shot on 17, you're going to hit the ball close, right? If you end up chunking a little bit or pulling it, well, if you're pulling it to that left-hand hole location, you're going to end up hitting it in the water, right? So what they're doing here, and 4 is the same way, right? 4, if you execute a wedge shot to that front pin, you're probably going to have like 5 feet for a birdie. If you pull it, you're in the water. It's just you have such fine margins for air out there in moving day that you're going to see some blowups. Maybe even your leader, Wyndham Clark, might have a little bit of a blowup. Who knows? It's just that kind of setup out there for moving day. So when it comes to the props, I don't love the underdog stuff when it comes to strokes and birdies. They've got strokes lower than where Prize Picks has them. Even their birdie lines are a little bit worse than Prize Picks because of the fact they have like a 0.9x multiplier over here. What I like on Underdog is actually exploiting the other side of things, right? If they're going to post guys on strokes too low, too high for birdies, too low for the bogeys or worse, right, I'm going to try and leverage that. And what I ended up finding here were 3 overs on bogeys that were all 1.1x. So let me go ahead and bring those up here. Let me refresh this so that we can bring it up. So it was an over on Nick Taylor bogeys. It disappeared there before I could click it. It was an over on Corey Connors bogeys. So where's that one at? This 1.1x. And then the last one, can't remember off the top of my head, but as soon as I see them, right, we'll be able to click it in. It was Mad McNeely. Over here at 1.1x himself. These 3 props are ones that I'd mix in because first off, I think that the bogey average is going to be at least like 2.8, maybe even 3 per round, like we saw for the first few days. And Matt McNeely is very prone to making bogeys. Nick Taylor, Corey Connors are, I would say, pretty average for this field when it comes to bogey avoidance, but they're also players that are playing in the latter half of the day, right? Guys like even McNeely too, right? Also playing in like the last hour, maybe hour and a half of tee times. They're going to have firmer greens by the time they get to the afternoon. The winds for at least their first like 3-4 hours of their round are going to be higher than what they had in the morning. And, a 3 bogey round would be pretty average, right? For what we have at this kind of golf course. So, the fact that we can get a boosted payout, right, on these three players that are teeing off in some of the worst conditions and get like a 6.6x payout, right, over here on a 3-man correlated slip, is pretty sweet, right? Like if we were just taking guys without a payout boost here, right, this 3-man would pay close to like 4.9x out there in terms of a payout. Because of the fact that we have this 1.1x multiplier, and look at this, right? We're getting higher than we normally get for a 3-leg power play. So like that over there on Underdog, I don't think there's a lot of value if you're going to try and take unders on strokes or overs on birdies. If you're going to do that, you probably do it over there on Prize Picks, which I'll go ahead and give you guys some thoughts right now. Be careful driving home. North Florida cops love pulling over cars from South Florida. They do, Dave. That's for sure. I'm driving in a Kia on Sunday too. We're not going to have any alcoholic beverages, so we'll be good to go. But yeah, they're not going to pull me over for speeding out there in the Kia Soul that I'm driving. And the reason for that, I didn't complain about this on my weekly live stream, but literally the night before I left for my trip, I have a BMW convertible, right? That's the car I drive. The locking top, like the convertible top, the hard top, ended up breaking on my car. And all I did was put the roof down when I was heading to a round of golf. And when I tried to go home, right, I tried to put the roof back up, it wouldn't go back up. So obviously had to drop off the car at BMW, and they tried to charge me $6,000 to fix that roof. So luckily my stepdad went over, picked up the car while I was away and took it to a much more reasonable place. But yeah, we're driving a Kia up here, which is not my BMW 5 Series that I drive. Let's say that much. It's not nearly the same kind of experience. But it is going to help me with not getting pulled over, that's for sure. I couldn't speed in that Kia if I wanted to. Like literally, I literally couldn't speed if I wanted to. What I'm doing now, guys, it's kind of unfortunate, is I'm bringing up all the Prize Pick stuff over here on my phone. Unfortunately, right, we can't bring it up over here on the stream. They block you from looking at the projections down here in Florida, but we'll try and find some value to enter here together. So the strokes board is higher, right? Like I was mentioning before, just to give you guys some comparisons. Let's look at Scotty Scheffler, right? So Scotty, they've got over here at 68 strokes over on Prize Picks, right? So if you do think it's going to play easier tomorrow, which I think there's a lot of evidence for that, right? Especially when it comes to birdies, do it on Prize Picks, right? Because Scotty, rather than being at 68 strokes, is at 69, right, on Prize Picks. Let's look at Rory. So let me take Rory here, show you guys what we're talking about. Rory, they have at, what is it? Do they not have a strokes number up? Yeah, they don't even have a strokes number up for Rory McIlroy, but he's at 69.5 over there on Prize Picks. If we take a look at Xander Schauffele here, Xander Schauffele is, I believe, at 68.5 strokes. So let's see. Yeah, he's at 68.5 strokes right over here on Underdog. On Prize Picks, he's at 69.5 strokes. So obviously, right, I liked some of these overs on bogeys, but you could even consider taking some overs on strokes, right? On average, they're like 1 stroke higher over there on the Prize Pick side. So I do think there's some value to potentially take some fades over here in Underdog. But what I want to do on Prize Picks is I want to find a few guys to take some unders on. And we need guys that are going to take advantage of moving day pins. And ideally, I want guys that aren't playing under pressure. So, kind of like the edge that we had for Showdown, right, where we're playing early guys, right, trying to take them in a lot of our lineups because of the lower winds, more receptive greens. We probably want to consider that for some of our prop exposure. So what I'm looking at here is, there are some guys at 70.5 that I'd be comfortable taking for some unders. But let me look at the 71s, because ideally, I think the push equity at 71 would be nice to have on some of these players. But I'm not married to that idea. I don't think I have to take somebody there. So what we're going to do is one prop I definitely want to mix in is Sam Burns under 70.5 strokes. He's a really good moving day player, high birdie percentage player that usually takes advantage of easy conditions and, has to make a move, right? He's -1. He's teeing off super early. So yeah, we're going to take Sam Burns at 70.5, and we're going to mix him in with, let's find one more early tee time. So, if they had Minwoo over there at 71 strokes, he would probably be one of the first guys that I would consider there. He's unfortunately at 70.5 over there on Prize Picks. But let me see who else we can work with. Tony Finau, I guess, would be a candidate, 70.5. which actually, speaking of, that's what we're going to do. We're going to go Tony Finau under 70.5 strokes, and we're going to go Sam Burns under 70.5 strokes. Kind of like a Sam Burns, Tony Finau is also a high birdie percentage player, tends to take advantage of easy conditions, as what we've seen at the Amex over the years, also at the Mexico Open, right? Evidanta, right? He takes on that resort style course very well. So when you're giving him pins that he can, access a backstop, that power is going to matter in some of the par fives. I like that for a Tony Finau. So in terms of our prize picks exposure, it's going to be those two. It's Sam Burns, Tony Finau under 70.5 strokes out there on that site. What I'm going to do now is bring up Hard Rock Bet real quick, which, by the way, guys, the Hard Rock Bet exposure, they don't always post boards, which is maybe the one frustrating part about it. Has been like unbelievable when it comes to some of our ROI. Today, they ended up posting some eagle props, actually 1.0 eagles per round, which if you guys know anything about, golf props, that is absolutely ridiculous. They shouldn't have guys at a whole eagle per round when it comes to their projections. And let's see if they have anything posted for today, which for some reason, my Hard Rock Bet is not loading. If I click on all leagues, it's not showing me all the leagues. So bear with me here while I try and get that fixed on my end. Maybe if I open a new window, I can get it to work. So let me try that. It's kind of strange. It's the only time I've had this happen on Hard Rock Bet. So let's see. Oh, yep, it's working on a new tab. So we'll just do that. It'll be our way to fix this. So they don't have anything posted yet when it comes to matchups because they don't know the tee times yet. Because of Rio Hizutune, and they obviously don't have any like birdie stuff up yet. But what we do have is the outright betting board, and obviously, guys, right? I wouldn't recommend betting Wyndham Clark at just like plus 175 to 1 odds. What I would consider doing is kind of like yesterday, right? We talked about like guys like JT, right? Where guys that I would maybe take a shot on. It's going down here to those like 40 to 50 to 1 range and potentially trying to find a piece of value. So something that sticks out to me would be like Sahith Theegala, right? What is he at this point? He's like -6 through the first 2 rounds. Let me double check on that. Where's the other tab? There it is. Let's look at good old Sahith Theegala. He's the type of player I would take at like 50 to 1. So Sahith Theegala is, where the hell is Sahith? He got the whole way to -7. And we can get him there at 50 to 1. Oh boy, that might get a little bit of exposure for myself. So that would be the type of player I'd be looking at. Hideki Matsuyama, even at 60 to 1, like what is his score right now? I know he's like -5, -6 at this stage. He's -6, right? Tied for 14th. Like 60 to 1 on him. Like I know when you compare him to Wyndham Clark, right? Over there at -14, they're 7 shots off the lead. All that has to happen is Wyndham Clark has to have a bad day, and all of these players get brought into the mix, right? Because let's say that Wyndham Clark, right, would do eject from the golf tournament. That puts somebody like Hideki 4 shots back, right, from second place. That puts somebody, like who else we were talking about there? So it was Wyndham Clark to hit the gala, right, at -7. So only would be 3 shots off the lead of second place at that point. Doesn't feel like a bad bet to take over there in Hard Rock Bet. So we'll have to see if I end up adding any live exposure. I did end up betting JT yesterday, which did not go well when it came to our live ad, but I don't hate these 2 spots. And in fact, I want to go ahead and actually take a look at Draftkings and see where they have the odds comparatively, because my guess would be is that they're way higher, right, when it comes to the odds, right? I'm assuming they're like closer to like 30, maybe 40 to 1. And that's usually a good indication that we're getting value. So let me go ahead and bring that up, do a little bit of price comparing. So yeah, I'll share my screen so you guys can see what we're looking at. Let's see. There we go. So Sahith Theegala, where you at? He's 40 to 1, right? So that's obviously a little bit of a better number than we could get otherwise. And where is my boy? Where the hell is he? Where's hell is Hideki at? Is the question of the day. Did they even? Oh, he's. What am I looking at here? I'm on the wrong tab. My apologies there, guys. So where's Hideki Matsuyama? He's at 45 to 1. Like you're getting slightly better numbers on both, where it's like 45 to 1 compared to 60 to 1. It's 40 to 1 compared to 50 to 1. I could be convinced to take that for value. So yeah, nothing posted on Hard Rock Bet when it comes to like the matchups and all that kind of stuff. But they will post that at some point tomorrow morning. Let's see. You had an M3 convertible hardtop. You missed that car. Yeah, it's a good car, but it's expensive to fix, huh? Kind of annoying. There isn't anything on Hard Rock right now. Yeah, feel you on that. Do I like Aberg at all tomorrow? He's sorry if I mentioned him before. I did not mention him before, so that's totally fine. I do think there's going to be a slight difference, Max, between AM PM. I don't think you have to only take AM guys though. I still think you're going to see a few ceiling performances right from guys either towards the middle to latter half of tee times. Aberg though, I think it's a decent play, right? He's -4. He's not overly chalky at like 17.5% ownership. That's what I've got him at in terms of his showdown ownership. I think he's a decent play. I mean, the 9 grand price tag, in my opinion, is probably the best part about playing Ludwig. He should probably be like $9,500, right? Like if we switch to Decky, right, who's $9,500 himself, with Aberg and the pricing, I think that would make more sense than where they have it currently, right? With Hideki, the more expensive player on DraftKings. So yeah, I like it actually. I think he's a pretty decent play there. Alrighty, guys, that is all I've got for this live stream. I've got to get to my dinner reservation that's here in, 35 minutes. But I appreciate all the support here on the channel as per usual. And best of luck out there with your moving day exposure. Smash a like button if you haven't already. We'll be doing a live stream again tomorrow evening. I'm out there for Sunday and ready to go out there and have ourselves a day. Hopefully, we can take down a GPP or two. It's been too long for me since taking down a Showdown GPP. It's been like, since the fall swing where I've gone down and taken one down. It's about time to actually win one of these GPPs. It's been a lot of close calls. It's been a lot of top tens we've had over the last month. And like I said, I'm just itching to get out there and get into first. So let's do that. If I don't win it, I want one of you guys to take down the contest. And for our prop exposure, let's bring it back for the stream slips here. Yesterday ended up going 0 for 2 on those. Today, I'm hoping it's going to be 2 for 2 for us. So best of luck out there. I'm looking forward to moving day, and catch you guys for the live stream tomorrow.